Racist woman makes a grave accusation against a black boy. The outcome of this unbelievable story will leave everyone completely shocked. Sarah Thompson was at home, surrounded by the silence that now filled her life after her husband's death. The soft morning light filtered through the curtains, illuminating the carefully arranged furniture that somehow felt heavier in his absence. As she sorted through a box of memories, her fingers brushed against an old photo of her and David laughing during a picnic in the park. He had always encouraged her to be more open, to embrace the differences of others. Looking at the picture, a lump formed in her throat. "Why did you always have so much faith in people, David?" she murmured, almost as if expecting him to respond. Life isn't that simple. The memories were sweet but also brought a sense of guilt. David would never have supported her growing discomfort with the changes in their community. In recent months, new black families had moved into their upscale London suburb, and contrary to the optimistic view her husband always presented, Sarah felt increasingly threatened. She believed their presence disrupted the balance that had always existed, and it left her feeling uneasy. That afternoon, she decided to meet her friend Claire at a local cafe, hoping that their conversation would help clear her mind. The cafe's atmosphere was welcoming, filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and the pleasant murmur of conversations in the background. Sarah sat at an outdoor table, watching people pass by as she waited for Claire. When her friend arrived, Sarah didn't hesitate to express her concerns. "Claire, don't you see how everything has changed? These new families, I don't know, they bother me. I feel like something isn't right." Claire frowned, worried. "Sarah, you have to remember that people are different. That doesn't mean they're dangerous. You can't judge someone just by their appearance." "But that's what I see. Every day I see that boy Oliver walking by with that backpack. Who knows what he's carrying? It could be drugs, you know? You have no evidence of that. If you keep focusing on what you fear, you'll end up missing out on the beauty of diversity," Claire replied, trying to stay calm. "Remember what David always said. We need to be more welcoming." Sarah sighed, feeling the weight of her friend's words. "I know, but it's complicated. Just looking at him makes me uncomfortable." After some time, the two friends said their goodbyes, but the feeling of unease lingered. As Sarah left the cafe, she decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. During her stroll, her eyes landed on Oliver, a 12-year-old black boy, playing soccer with his friends in the park. He was laughing, completely oblivious to the dark thoughts swirling in Sarah's mind. The light sound of childlike joy only unsettled her further. Why is he so happy? How can he be so carefree? Sarah thought as she watched the scene. His laughter seemed to echo in her mind, reinforcing her belief that something was wrong, that there was hidden danger behind that innocent joy. That sight left her distressed, and she opted to head back home. The weight of her discomfort followed her, becoming a shadow that wouldn't let her be at peace. What should have been a calm day was now filled with doubts and insecurities. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her once stable life was about to change in ways she didn't yet understand, and that uncertainty terrified her. In the park of the upscale London suburb, the afternoon sun bathed the field where a group of children had gathered to play soccer. Among them was Oliver Davies, a 12-year-old boy who stood out. His smile brightened the surroundings, reflecting the joy he felt as he practiced the sport with his friends. For him, those moments represented freedom and friendship, far removed from the worries that clouded Sarah Thompson's mind, the neighbor who watched him with suspicion. "Come on, Oliver, kick the ball," shouted Lucas, one of Oliver's friends, while dribbling past an opponent. The camaraderie among them was palpable. They laughed and cheered each other on, creating a vibrant and welcoming. With his natural skill, Oliver seized the ball, skillfully maneuvering past two players before making a perfect pass to his friend Miguel, who stood ready in the goal area. "Goal!" Miguel exclaimed as the ball hit the back of the net. Applause and cheers echoed through the park, even catching the attention of passing adults. "One day I'm going to be a professional player. I'll play in the Premier League," declared Lucas, his eyes sparkling with youthful ambition. The kids gathered around, laughing and sharing their dreams. "And I'll be your agent," joked Oliver, making everyone laugh even more. The group talked about famous players, cheering crowds, and the most impressive plays they had seen on television. Their diversity, with different backgrounds, became a source of strength, a true celebration of friendship. Meanwhile, Sarah watched from the sidewalk in front of her house, a feeling of discomfort growing within her. The scene of joy and unity among the children only reinforced her misguided beliefs. She knew Oliver often passed in front of her home, and the image of him with his backpack now associated with her unfounded worries. Why does he need to walk around with that backpack? What is he carrying in there, she thought, feeling an unease she couldn't explain. As Oliver and his friends chatted excitedly about the game on their way home, Miguel commented, "Did you see that goal? It was incredible." "Yeah, and you, Oliver, you're going to be the next Messi," joked Lucas, making everyone laugh again. But as they passed a group of neighbors, Oliver overheard some comments that hit him like an arrow. "Look, here comes the backpack kid. I bet he's involved in bad stuff," one woman said in a low voice loud enough for him to hear. Oliver's heart ached. He tried to ignore it, but sadness settled in his chest. "This neighborhood is full of strange people," one of the boys murmured as they walked away. The group, noticing Oliver's change in expression, quickly shifted the topic, but the wound had already been inflicted. Oliver didn't want his friends to know the pain those words caused him. He forced a smile and kept walking, but the lightness he felt while playing soccer began to fade. That night, as he prepared for bed, Oliver couldn't shake the thoughts of what he had heard. He remembered his father William's encouraging words about the importance of not letting others affect him. "People can be cruel, but you know who you are, and that's what matters," echoed her father's voice in her mind. Determined not to let prejudice shake him, Oliver pulled the blanket up to his chin and closed his eyes, dreaming of the day he would play in a big stadium, cheered on by thousands of fans. Meanwhile, at Sarah's house, the woman felt a growing discomfort. "What's happening to my neighborhood? Why is this bothering me so much?" she thought, gazing out the window. She needed to confront her fears and prejudices, but instead she could only see Oliver passing by with his backpack, a shadow in her mind that was becoming stronger by the day. William Davies sat on the living room couch, looking out the window as sunlight filtered through the leaves of the trees in the yard. The day was beautiful, but his heart was heavy. He thought of Oliver, his 12-year-old son, and how things had changed since the new families moved into the neighborhood. He could feel the tension in the air, an unease that hadn't existed before. What should have been a welcoming space now felt divided by invisible barriers. William remembered his own childhood, the challenges he faced in a school where discrimination was a constant presence. He decided he needed to talk to Oliver about these feelings. "Dad, are you okay?" Oliver asked, entering the room in his sweaty t-shirt after a soccer game with friends. William smiled at his son, but the concern lingered in his eyes. "I'm fine, son. Just thinking about how things have changed around here. How are you feeling at school?" Oliver hesitated before answering. "It's okay, I guess. But some kids have been acting strange. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like they don't accept me." William frowned. "What do you mean by that? Has there been a problem?" "Not exactly. It's just that when I'm playing with my friends, some of the neighbors look at us like we're doing something wrong. And I heard some comments about your mom, Dad. I don't know how to deal with it." William felt anger rising inside him. "You shouldn't let what others say affect you, Oliver. You are an amazing kid. And if they can't see that, the problem is theirs." "But what if they don't stop?" Oliver asked, insecurity evident in his voice. "Then we need to do something about it. We can't let prejudice spread. I'll call some parents to talk about this. The community needs to understand that we're all equal, regardless of skin color." Faced with his father's determination, Oliver nodded. "All right, Dad. I trust you." After that conversation, William decided it was time to take action. He started making phone calls, seeking support from other parents who also had children playing in the park. Soon, he managed to gather a group of concerned mothers and fathers. That night, while having dinner, William mentioned his idea to his wife, who was busy serving the meal. "Honey, I'm thinking of organizing a meeting with the parents of the kids to discuss what's happening. We need to do something so that Oliver and his friends feel safe." She looked at him surprised. "Do you think that will work? Some people are very resistant to change, William." "Yes, I know, but we can't just sit back and wait for things to get better on their own. We have to fight for a more welcoming environment. What do you think?" She sighed, pondering. "If you think it's the right thing to do, then I'll support you. But we'll have to be ready to face resistance." William smiled, feeling strengthened by her support. The next morning, he began drafting an invitation for the parents, explaining the importance of the meeting. He made sure to emphasize that the goal was not to accuse anyone, but to promote inclusion and understanding. The following days were filled with anticipation and anxiety. The date of the meeting was approaching, and William was nervous but determined. He knew he needed to be the voice of change for his son and for everyone else facing discrimination. On the night of the meeting, the room was filled with parents, some with worried expressions, others visibly skeptical. William took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He stood up and, looking at the audience, saw Oliver sitting in a corner watching him with expectation. "Thank you all for being here tonight," William began, his voice steady. "We're here because our children deserve to grow up in an environment where they feel safe and accepted, regardless of their appearance. Recently I noticed that there are prejudiced attitudes that are affecting our children, and that is unacceptable." He paused, observing the reactions around him. "We need to come together as a community to promote inclusion. Our children are learning to coexist with differences, and we as adults must be the example they need." The room fell silent, and William could see that the message was being absorbed. He continued, "Let's work together to ensure everyone feels welcome here. What can we do to create a more inclusive space for all?" Conversations began to flow, and William knew he was taking an important step toward a better future, not just for Oliver, but for the entire community. Lucy Edwards, a 35-year-old lawyer, was watching the situation in her community with growing concern. She knew that racial discrimination was a deep-rooted issue, and that the recent incident involving Sarah and Oliver was not an isolated case, but rather a reflection of much deeper problems. Sitting at her work desk, surrounded by piles of legal documents, she decided it was time to take action. With a clear purpose in mind, she picked up her phone and called William. "Hi William, it's me, Lucy. Do you have a moment?" Her voice was firm yet gentle, reflecting the urgency she felt. "Sure, Lucy, what's going on?" William replied, his concern evident. "About what happened with Oliver and Sarah. I think we need to organize a community meeting. We need to talk about this not just among ourselves but with all the residents," Lucy proposed, her mind already racing with ideas. "I completely agree. It's essential that the community hears this. People need to understand the impact that prejudice can have," William said, already starting to plan the logistics in his mind. "I'll prepare an invitation and distribute it in the neighborhood. Can you help mobilize Oliver's friends' parents?" Lucy suggested, envisioning the reactions she might face. "Yes, I'll keep the parents informed. This is important for all of us," William replied with determination. A few days later, Lucy was in her living room, surrounded by flyers she had created hers. With a smile on her face, she began folding the papers and placing them in envelopes. Throughout the day, she distributed the invitations to her neighbors, explaining the importance of the meeting. Many seemed reluctant, but others, especially those who knew William and Oliver, expressed their support. That evening, the atmosphere in the small community hall was tense. Residents began arriving in groups, whispering among themselves. William was at the front, ready to lead the conversation. Lucy, by his side, looked out at the crowd and felt a mix of anxiety and hope. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. We are here because we need to discuss a matter that, unfortunately, is very present in our community. Racial prejudice," William began, his voice firm, yet gentle. "What happened to Oliver is not just an isolated incident. It reflects a lack of understanding and empathy." Sarah was at the back of the room, her heart pounding. She didn't want to be there, but she knew she had to face the consequences of her actions. When William mentioned Oliver's name, she flinched, feeling guilt consume her. Lucy took the floor. "Each of us has the power to change this narrative. We cannot allow fear and ignorance to govern our lives. We need to listen to our neighbors, understand their experiences, and learn to coexist in harmony." "But what if some of these new families don't fit in here?" A man at the back of the room interrupted, his doubt echoing among the attendees. "That's exactly the issue we need to discuss. What does it mean to fit in? It's not a matter of color or origin, but of respect and acceptance," Lucy replied, looking deeply into the man's eyes. The room fell silent, and Sarah felt increasingly isolated. She hadn't expected the conversation to go so deep and meaningful. The gazes of her neighbors made her feel small. Lucy continued, "We cannot allow prejudice to define our community. Each of us has a story, and we need to listen to those stories and learn from them." The meeting went on, and residents began to share their own experiences, creating a safe space for dialogue. Sarah, though reluctant, started to realize that her own insecurities and fears were shaping her perceptions. She felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but she couldn't find the right words to speak. Finally, William asked, "Does anyone want to share how we can move forward together?" After an awkward silence, a woman raised her hand. "I just want us all to get to know each other better. How about we organize a community event where we can gather, share meals, stories, and experiences?" "That's a great idea," Lucy agreed, excited. An event where we can celebrate diversity and promote inclusion. We can work on this together. By the end of the meeting, despite the tension in the air, there was a sense of hope. Lucy and William knew the road ahead would be long, but they were determined to continue the fight against prejudice and build a united and welcoming community. Sarah, amid all this, began to understand that she needed to confront her own flaws and biases, but the first step still felt distant. The community meeting had left a heavy atmosphere in the elegant suburb of London. The echoing murmurs of the residents spread down the street as some gathered in small groups, discussing what had happened. At the center of the controversy was Sarah Thompson, the widow who had until then been seen as a respectable and kind figure. Now she had become a symbol of prejudice and distrust. On the sidewalk, Sarah watched from a distance as her neighbors, who once greeted her with smiles, now avoided her. The disapproving looks from some mothers and the coldness of the men made her feel isolated, as if she were on a deserted island. She recalled what had happened at the meeting, the way Lucy confronted her, the sharp words, and the community's indignation. "How could you think that, Sarah?" Lucy had asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "Oliver is just a child." "He's not just a child," Sarah had replied, anger and fear seeping through her voice. "He represents something I don't understand, something that scares me." The silence that followed was deafening. Lucy's outrage was palpable, and the disappointed glances from those she considered friends hit her like an arrow. That afternoon, Sarah sat in her garden, the flowers around her swaying gently in the breeze. She couldn't escape the weight of her own actions. "Why did I act this way?" she whispered to herself, looking at the flowers that once brought her joy. Why couldn't I see beyond Oliver's skin color? Meanwhile, in another corner of the suburb, William Davies was talking with other parents in the park. The tone of his voice was firm, but his concern was evident on his face. "We need to come together," he said, gesturing with his hand. "What Sarah did isn't just a mistake. It reflects what our society still faces. We can't let this become a norm." "I can't believe she would think that," one of the parents commented, shaking his head. "She's always been so nice." William sighed, aware that the situation was complicated. "We need to show her that fear shouldn't be our reaction. Love and understanding are the only ways to overcome this." Returning to her home, Sarah noticed that interactions between her neighbors were changing. The children who used to play in groups were now separating, and she realized that some parents were choosing not to let their kids get close to her. "Look, it's Sarah," one child said to another, her voice filled with fear. "She doesn't like Oliver." That statement hit Sarah like a punch in the stomach. What was a mere observation to the children was a harsh and bitter truth for her. That night, Sarah decided to attend the community event that William and Lucy were organizing, even with a heavy heart. "Am I still welcome?" she wondered as she got ready. When she arrived, she saw that the room was full. The faces that once seemed familiar now felt strange and distant. William stood at the front talking about the need for empathy and understanding. His words echoed the truth that she had ignored. "We all have a role to play," William said, as the gazes turned toward Sarah, "and we need to ensure that our children grow up in an environment where love prevails over fear." The silence in the room was heavy, and Sarah felt the weight of the stares upon her. "Twitter." She wanted to apologize, but the words felt stuck in her throat. When the meeting ended, several people approached William, offering their support. Sarah, on the other hand, felt even more isolated. "I just wanted to protect my home," she murmured to herself as she walked home. "Protect? Or isolate?" Lucy's voice echoed in her mind. "What are you really protecting, Sarah?" Doubt consumed her, and the interactions that once felt warm were now a distant memory. "How did I let this happen?" she thought as the reality of what she had done settled in. The division in the community was not just among the neighbors but also within herself. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink as families in the suburb gathered at the local park for the much-anticipated community event. There was a palpable sense of expectation in the air, a mix of anxiety and hope. The tables were decorated with colorful tablecloths and children ran around laughing and playing. Sarah, although a bit lost in her thoughts, couldn't help but notice the joy on the faces of others. In the center of the park, a small stage had been set up where various performances were scheduled for the evening. Oliver, dressed in a vibrant t-shirt, was visibly nervous alongside his friends. They had rehearsed a play about friendship and acceptance, and the responsibility of representing their experiences weighed heavily on their shoulders. As Oliver looked out at the audience, his hands were sweaty, yet the determination in his eyes was undeniable. "Are you ready, Oliver?" asked one of his friends, Daniel, with an encouraging smile. I think it'll be amazing. Yeah, I'm a little nervous, Oliver replied, biting his lower lip. What if no one likes us? If they don't like us, it's because they didn't understand. We know what we're doing, and that's what matters, said Anna, another friend in the group, placing a hand on Oliver's shoulder. Meanwhile, on the other side of the park, Sarah watched the scene with a mix of discomfort and curiosity. She couldn't deny that there was something special about the camaraderie among those kids, but her heart was still heavy with doubts and prejudices. The thought that Oliver might be a bad influence tormented her. At the same time, the beauty of the presentation about to begin started to chip away at her resistance. The performance began, and as Oliver and his friends took to the stage, a wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. The children positioned themselves and began to act, their voices echoing with enthusiasm. The play depicted the journey of a group of friends from different backgrounds who, despite their differences, found strength in one another. Oliver, in his leading role, spoke about acceptance and the importance of looking beyond appearances. It doesn't matter the color of your skin or where you come from, Oliver said with a strong voice. What matters is who you are inside and how you treat others. Applause began to ripple through the park as the faces of the adults lit up with smiles. Sarah, despite her internal conflicts, couldn't help but feel moved by Oliver's words. She saw children from her neighborhood, who were once just unfamiliar faces, now coming together and celebrating their differences. The performance continued, and the energy in the air was palpable. See, Sarah? Lucy said, approaching her without her noticing. Look how they understand each other. This is what we need in our community. Yeah, it's beautiful, Sarah replied hesitantly, but she couldn't completely shake off her insecurities. But what if that's not enough? What if they don't belong here? These kids showed that acceptance is the first step and change starts with us, the adults, Lucy insisted, looking into Sarah's eyes. We need to learn from them. As the play went on, Sarah began to realize that she was surrounded by a new reality, one she had ignored for too long. The strength and unity of the children challenged her to rethink her beliefs. At the end of the performance, Oliver and his friends received a thunderous ovation, and the children embraced, beaming with joy. That was amazing, Daniel shouted, jumping with happiness. We crushed it. I'll never forget this, Oliver said with a wide smile. It was the best day ever. From the depths of her being, something started to change in Sarah. Oliver's words echoed in her mind, and she questioned, could it be possible to transform her prejudice into acceptance? She didn't have all the answers, but the children's performance was igniting a spark within her, a glimmer of hope that perhaps could evolve into something more. The community event was in full swing, and the atmosphere was charged with emotions. The booths adorned with flags representing different cultures contrasted with the tension that hung over the area. Sarah, still consumed by anger and insecurity, watched as groups gathered, laughing and sharing stories. What once was a familiar place for her now felt foreign and hostile. In a corner of the park, William Davies, Oliver's father, approached with a determined expression. He had witnessed the way Sarah treated his son and knew it was time to confront her. With a firm yet non-aggressive look, he approached Sarah. Sarah, he began, his voice heavy with emotion. We need to talk. What you did to Oliver can't just be left like this. He deserves an apology, and you know that. Sarah crossed her arms, her face flushed with indignation. William, I didn't do anything wrong. I was just worried about what I saw. He was always out on the street, and I worried about the safety of my neighborhood. Sarah's defensiveness was palpable, and she felt cornered. William took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Concern can't be an excuse for prejudice. You looked at Oliver and saw only the color of his skin, not the boy he truly is. He's a good kid, full of dreams, just like any other child. What you did hurt not just him, but all of us. Sarah felt a wave of shame but quickly steeled herself with indignation. You can't blame me for being worried. I'm a mother just like you. I know you are, William replied, his voice still firm. But this isn't about being a mother. It's about understanding and accepting differences. You need to acknowledge your mistake, apologize to Oliver. He needs to hear that from you. The tension between them grew, and the murmurs of the crowd in the background seemed to intensify. Sarah looked around, noticing some curious glances turning towards her and William. A group of children, among them Oliver, stood nearby, anxiously waiting to see how the situation would unfold. Sarah's heart raced. She didn't want to be seen as the villain of the story. I can't just apologize like that, Sarah protested, her voice trembling. "People will think I'm crazy. Are you more concerned about what others think than about what's right?" William questioned, frustration evident in eyes. What you did was devastating for Oliver. He felt bad. He felt inferior. What would you say if it were your child? Would you want someone to treat them like that? William's words pierced through the armor Sarah had built around herself. She hesitated, anger starting to give way to doubt. Oliver's gaze, standing a few meters away, watched her with a mix of sadness and hope. He was just a child, and she had allowed her prejudices to cloud her view of him. I just don't know how to do this," Sarah said, her voice now softer, almost a whisper. "You start by standing up and speaking the truth. You begin by apologizing. That's how change happens, Sarah. That's how people can start to heal," William replied with an encouraging look. The crowd around them began to stir, and Sarah felt the pressure mount. What was once a celebratory event was now becoming a stage for her greatest challenge. With her heart racing and her mind in turmoil, she looked at Oliver again. He seemed so small, so vulnerable. The anger that had once sustained her began to dissipate, giving way to a new understanding, an understanding she never knew she needed. "All right," she said, finally determined. "I'll do it." The words were almost a whisper, but William heard them clearly. "I'll be right here with you," he affirmed, encouraging her. "It's the first step." Sarah walked to the center of the event, feeling all eyes on her. The crowd quieted, and the murmurs turned into an expectant silence. She took a deep breath, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders, and prepared to finally face the consequences of her actions. After the tumultuous community event, Sarah Thompson sat alone in her garden, sunlight filtering through the leaves of the trees, but she couldn't feel the joy it once brought her. The voices of the community echoed in her mind, filled with disappointment and reproach. She had strayed from what was familiar and safe, challenging her ingrained beliefs. Now, the weight of guilt and shame felt unbearable. It was then that Lucy Edwards, her neighbor and attorney, decided to visit Sarah. Without knocking, she entered the yard and found her sitting in a rocking chair, eyes lost in the void. "Hi, Sarah, may I join you?" Lucy asked, sitting down beside her. "Of course," Sarah replied, her voice low and trembling. "Sorry, I'm just not doing very well." "I understand," Lucy said, her expression softening. "That meeting was intense. Many emotions were running high. But you know you're not alone, right?" Sarah looked at Lucy, feeling a mix of gratitude and sadness. "I don't know how I got to this point. That boy, Oliver, I judged him for no reason. And now I feel so lost." "It's normal to feel that way," Lucy said gently. "But maybe it's an opportunity for you to grow. We are all constantly learning. How about joining a support group? It's a safe space where we can share our experiences and learn together." Sarah hesitated. The idea intimidated her. "Do you think they would accept me? I'm the person who caused all this. You may see your story as a stain, but it could actually inspire others to reflect on their own prejudices. Change begins with vulnerability," Lucy encouraged, fixing her gaze on Sarah. "And you have a role to play in that change." Those words echoed in Sarah's mind. Taking a deep breath, she decided she needed to try. "Okay, I'll go, but I don't know what to say." "Just be honest, Sarah. Talk about how you're feeling, your internal struggles. It could help more people than you realize," Lucy replied, encouraging her. In the days that followed, Sarah prepared for the support group meeting. Her heart raced as she entered the room, filled with unfamiliar faces. There was a diversity of people, of all ages, united by a common cause. At the back, a poster read, "Welcoming and Understanding." Lucy was there, and she smiled encouragingly at Sarah. "You can do this," she murmured. When the meeting began, Sarah felt adrenaline coursing through her body. Several people shared their stories, some moving and others filled with pain. Finally, it was her turn. With a trembling voice, she began, "Hello, my name is Sarah. I am the woman who confronted a black boy in my community. I judged him without knowing him, just because he looked different from me." The room fell silent, all eyes on her. "I thought I was protecting my neighborhood, but in truth I was only feeding my own prejudices." A woman with curly hair sitting a few feet away raised her hand. "Sarah, it's brave of you to be here and share that. Many people never manage to acknowledge their mistakes." "Thank you," Sarah said, feeling a lump in her throat. "I realize that true change begins within ourselves. I don't want to be the person who fuels hatred. I want to learn and help build a more welcoming community." After her words, a murmur of support echoed in the room. Lucy smiled, visibly moved. "You're taking a big step, Sarah, and this is just the beginning." The atmosphere felt lighter, and Sarah sensed a tremendous weight being lifted from her shoulders. In that moment, she understood that change wouldn't happen overnight, but the journey had begun. Together, she and the community could work to create a space of inclusion and acceptance, where everyone, regardless of their background, could feel valued. Sarah was at home, lost in thought after the community event. Oliver's words still resonated in her mind, and the image of the audience, divided between applause and disappointed looks, lingered with her. While making tea in the kitchen, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her friend Anna, telling her about a problem involving the son of one of the mothers from the support group. "Hi, Sarah. Did you hear what happened to Lucas? He's facing bullying at school, and the boys are being cruel because of his skin color. We need to do something." Sarah's heart tightened. Lucas was a lovely boy, always full of energy and smiles. She never imagined that he could go through such a tough situation. With a mix of guilt and urgency, she replied, "No, I didn't know. What can we do?" The idea of a support group began to form in her mind. What started as a simple meeting to discuss prejudice could transform into a space for support and education. She recalled the conversations she had with Lucy about how the community needed to learn to come together, not apart. "I'll talk to Lucy," she decided, feeling that action needed to be taken. The next day, Sarah met Lucy at a local cafe. The atmosphere was light, but the concern on both their faces was palpable. "Lucy, I heard that Lucas is being bullied at school. We need to do something about it," Sarah said, her voice tinged with determination. Lucy agreed, her expression growing serious. "Yes, we need to involve more parents and educators. We can't let these situations go without a response. What do you have in mind?" "What if we organized a meeting at the school?" Sarah suggested. "We could invite all the parents and talk about the impact of racism and bullying. It would be an opportunity to educate and unite the community." "That's an excellent idea. We can prepare informational materials and even invite some experts to speak about the emotional impact of bullying on children," Lucy replied, excited about the possibility. As they discussed the details, Sarah felt a wave of hope. For the first time in a long while, she felt part of something bigger than her own fears and prejudices. The idea of helping Lucas and other young people overcome their struggles motivated her in a way she hadn't expected. In the following days, Sarah and Lucy worked tirelessly. They distributed flyers around the school, calling on parents and students to attend the meeting. The day arrived, and the classroom was filled with curious and concerned faces. Sarah stood at the front, nervous but determined. "Thank you all for being here," Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly. "Today, we are here to talk about an issue that affects not just Lucas, but many children in our community. Racial bullying is not just a word, it's a reality that hurts and divides. We need to learn to respect and support one another." As she spoke, she noticed some familiar faces, including William, who was watching her intently. He nodded, encouraging her to continue. "I know many of us have prejudices, and it's time to face them. We cannot allow our children to grow up in a toxic environment. We must be examples of acceptance and love." By the end of the meeting, Sarah felt invigorated. The supportive words and stories shared by the parents highlighted the urgency of the situation. Lucas was there, his eyes shining as he listened to every word. When the meeting concluded, a group of parents approached Sarah and Lucy. "We're all in this together," said a mother of a student. "We need to create an environment where our children feel safe and loved. Let's work together to change this situation." "Yes, let's do this," Sarah agreed, feeling the strength of the collective. "We're just getting started, but together, we can make a real difference." Sarah's determination propelled her to become even more involved, and the thought that she could be a change agent in her community filled her with hope. She realized that the fight against prejudice was not just the responsibility of a few, but of everyone. In that moment, she made a promise to herself. She would not only become an ally, but also a defender of diversity and inclusion. The day after the community event, Sarah was alone at home, the weight of guilt and shame still following her. The gray day mirrored her mood. She sat at the kitchen table with a steaming cup of tea, trying to organize her thoughts. As she looked out the window, the image of Oliver playing soccer with his friends wouldn't leave her mind. She recalled his sad expression at the event when he felt exposed in front of the entire community. In this moment of reflection, an unexpected thought struck her. Her own mother had faced discrimination when she was young, but had never spoken about it. Sarah abruptly stood up, her heart racing. How could I forget? She murmured to herself. Memories flooded back, reminders of her childhood when her mother warned her about the importance of being kind and open. Curious and distressed, she decided to look for the old photo album she had stored in the attic. After a quick search, she found a dusty box filled with yellowed photographs. As she opened it, her gaze landed on an image of her mother, young and smiling, at a school party, surrounded by friends of different ethnicities. On the back of the photo was a handwritten note, "Friendship knows no color." With the box now open on the table, Sarah began to flip through the photos, each revealing a fragment of her mother's life. In one memory, her mother recounted an episode where she faced prejudice at school but always chose kindness and empathy over hate. That revelation shook her so deeply that tears began to roll down her face. Why didn't I ever ask about this? She thought, feeling the weight of her conscience. Moved by a new determination, Sarah decided she needed to apologize to Oliver. She not only wanted to redeem herself, but she also understood that she needed to be part of the change she wished to see in the community. With her heart racing, she headed to the park, where she knew Oliver and his friends often played. Upon arrival, she saw the group gathered, laughing and having fun. The sound of children's joy was a stark contrast to her internal feelings. Sarah hesitated for a moment, watching Oliver from a distance. When he noticed her presence, his expression changed. Oliver looked at his friends, who stopped playing and waited, curious. Taking a deep breath, Sarah approached, her voice trembling slightly. "Oliver, I need to talk to you." He looked at her with suspicion but stepped forward. "What do you want, Mrs. Thompson?" I came here to apologize. I judged you without knowing anything about you. I shouldn't have done that," Sarah said, her voice filled with emotion. "I'm learning that prejudice is a trap that prevents us from seeing the truth." Oliver listened, his expression still cautious. "You don't know anything about me. I know I was wrong, and I don't want you to feel like you need to justify yourself for being who you are. Your skin color doesn't define who you are. I'm trying to understand that now," Sarah explained, her words coming out with sincerity. A silence hung in the air, and Oliver's friends watched the scene with anticipation. After a moment, Oliver spoke, his voice low but firm. "It's hard, you know? People always look at me and see only the color of my skin. They don't see who I really am. I understand now, and I want to change. I want to be an ally, not an adversary," Sarah replied, her heart pounding in her chest. "Please give me a chance to make this right." At that moment, something shifted in Oliver's expression. He glanced at his friends and then back at Sarah. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now, but I'd like to try. It's a start." Sarah smiled, a wave of relief washing over her. "Thank you, Oliver. That means a lot to me." That afternoon, the sun began to shine, illuminating the park and warming the air. Sarah and Oliver, along with their friends, started to share their experiences. The conversation, which had once seemed impossible, now flowed naturally. The community was finally coming together, and Sarah felt as though she was breaking free from the shackles of prejudice that had held her captive. As they walked away, Sarah looked at Oliver and his friends, now chatting and laughing together. She realized that the change began within her, and although the journey would be long, it was an important step toward acceptance and inclusion. The past might have brought pain, but the future promised hope and unity. She was ready to fight against prejudice, not just for Oliver, but for the entire community. "Friendship knows no color," she thought, smiling as she recalled her mother's words. And at last she felt part of something bigger,